Hello everybody and welcome to the 11th instalment of Doctor Who The Classic Series Action Figures A History. In today's episode we delve into 2013, the 50th anniversary of Doctor Who, as we take a look at the Classic Series action figures of the Forbidden Planet exclusive series, as well as a brand new line of Doctor Who action figures in the Doctor and Dalek 2-packs, released as a part of a Toys R Us series to celebrate 50 years of Doctor Who, featuring Daleks alongside every incarnation of the Doctor. This period within Doctor Who history sees some rather exciting action figures being released, including a second variation of Sutekh, the first ever Brigadier action figure, as portrayed by Nicholas Courtney, alongside the release of further classic series companions, with Katie Manning as Jo Grant, and of course Sophie Aldred as Ace, as seen within Remembrance of the Daleks, and of course your traditional load of many Dalek variants. 2013 finally arrives, the year of Doctor Who's 50th anniversary, and very unusually, the Forbidden Planet exclusive line of classic series action figures by this point are under quite a lot of strain, as 2013 in fact sees a rather small amount of Forbidden Planet exclusive sets. However, all of them that are released are rather exciting sets indeed, starting off with this brilliant set, Three Doctors set, featuring the Brigadier, Jo Grant, alongside a Gel Guard. This set is incredibly exciting because not only do we get to see Jo Grant, one of the most infamous classic series Doctor Who companions, but also the Brigadier, a character within classic series Doctor Who history that had a lot of impact, and one that a lot of classic series fans had wanted within the classic series line for many, many years. So the first figure of the set that I may as well take a look at is the unusual one. It is of course Mr. Gel Guard, who only did ever get to see this one release. Now of course he is a very cheapish figure to make, simply because he is a rotocast sculpt, much like say the Master's TARDISes, like the Grandfather Clock or the Computer Bank, and it is a very unusual figure, much like the Drashig that we did of course get to see in the later half of 2012. However, a nice figure nevertheless to go alongside the previously released Omega in the Third Doctor's Enemies set. Now, as you would expect, detail-wise, this figure is very basic, really. We just have lots of bubbles all over the body, much like how the costume did in the actual story. Around the top of this, we have a greenish paint tap that has been applied, and in fact, different shades of green along this to kind of replicate the material. Come to this rather unusual sort of base piece that almost sludges around the floor, and the same is also spread around to the back as well, where we have a few almost water splash sections dribbling down the side of the figure. How lovely indeed. And then of course at the very top we do have the inclusion of the eye also. Of course it's not just painted on, which is something they could have very easily done. However, they've decided to add a bit more detail to this, where we have the eyepiece underneath, which is almost a pale purple colour, and then over the top of this we have a clear piece of plastic, kind of add a little bit of the illusion of a level to the sculpt, which is nice. It's certainly better than just having it painted on, so I do appreciate that. The one piece of articulation that this figure does of course have rather handily recreates one of the only movements that the Gel Guard has within the Three Doctors. It is of course the weird claw design on the arm where they can of course zap things and then take them to the antimatter universe or something like that, out of a translucent orangey red plastic. And much like the rest of the body, we have a weathering design that has been added over the top of this, or at least a darker coloured wash that can be seen around the sides of the claw, as well as on this almost skin-like section as well. Also, this will glow within the actual story, and then of course around the opposite side we do have pretty much exactly the same detailing on there as well. So a nice inclusion, and I'm glad that that is actually articulated. The next figure of the set is of course Jo Grant, as portrayed by Katie Manning. Now this will be the first of a number of different variants that we would see of Jo Grant over the next few years, and naturally I'm really happy that we got to see this sculpt before the downfall of the Forbidden Planet exclusive series, simply because it is a brand new body, and Jo Grant's costumes are very unique in their approach, and they have a lot of very 70s designs, and that will be something of which that will be very hard to replicate by using pre-existing sculpts. For example, if they decided to release a Jo as a part of the B&M re-release line that we do of course see these days. So naturally the first release was from the Three Doctors, where she is sporting her rather iconic fur jacket along with a blue skirt piece underneath. So taking a further look at the costume, I can remember the sheer excitement when this figure was announced. We were finally going to get a Katie Manning Jo Grant figure to add to the collection. I do believe, in fact, the first announcement that we got of this figure was Katie Manning herself holding both of the prototypes on her Twitter, and the outbreak of excitement there was when we finally got to see these figures released in colour as well was incredibly exciting. So naturally the costume is rather impressive. We get to see this fur coat that has a palish bluey purpley wash added over it, along with a whiter design added over it to emphasise the fur, of course, and underneath this we do get the pale skirt design that we'll be going on to in a little bit. Nicely included is each individual ring on her hands as well. Of course, the lower half of the figure is pretty much exactly the same sculpt on all of the Jo Grants that you would see over the years, where we do have the legs that are just the standard bare design, and then we have the high heels there at the very bottom that are nicely painted in dark blue design with a rather highish heel indeed at the very back. The likeness to Katie Manning is one that caused a little bit of a debate back in the day, simply because the paint application varied on each individual figure, some of which looked absolutely brilliant, and others looked completely horrific, and I think that the sculpt itself is actually rather impressive. They've certainly got Jo Grant's very cheery character. Of course, you have the rather plumpish cheeks, a very broadish smile, and then of course those massive bold eyes, very much like how she has within the TV show, and the sheer excitement that she always sports throughout pretty much all of the stories that she features within. I think the paint application on the eyes specifically are incredibly sharp and something very unusual which you don't normally get to see within the classic series line. There seems to be a lot of detail within the actual eyes other than just being a white splodge with an iris added over the top. There seems to be a lot of additional detail added over the top of this. The lips are also painted a natural colour, and then we do also have the inclusion of the hair, which as per usual has your standard design as lots of different details of strands of different curls of hair and things like that, with of course the yellow and then of course the darker base colour added over the top to really emphasise those details. Certainly does look like Katie Manning, however from different angles it can look a little bit unusual. This figure of Jo Grant was in fact very unusual because it had a special feature that a lot of classic series action figures do not have. In fact, this is the first ever figure, I do believe, within the Character Options line to have this feature, and I think by this point Character Options were possibly being very strategic about the sculpts that they created, and were thinking more along the lines of how can we reuse sculpts to make it look like other costumes from the era, so we can have multiple different versions of the same companion with different costumes. Very much like how we got to see with Leela. Of course they used different PVC pieces of the main base body, as we've seen with the Invasion of Time image of the Fendal variations of the figure, and then of course with Perry we had numerous different variations of her costume as well, using the same base sculpt. And with Jo they decided to take it to a slightly different level, because if you rip off the arms of the figure, as you can see it can be a little bit of a struggle at some points, but if you tilt the arms and pull them, you can completely rip them off, which does create a very odd looking Jo Grant, it has to be said. And then you can take off the fur coat itself to reveal the costume underneath, and by doing this you can then put on some other additional arms included with the figure, in fact create an entirely different variation in costume. So here we have the second variation of Jo Grant from the Three Doctors, this time round with the fur coat removed to basically reveal the entirety of the pale blue dress underneath. So as you can see at the top we do have the addition of the fur collar, and then the rest of the actual body is just a standard pale blue with the detailing of the white lines around the sides of the cuffs, the rather puffy 70s style cuffs, and then of course the same can be said for the bottom of the skirt as well, and pretty much the same detailing is around the back, which is once again using a very similar sculpt. The Leela figure, where we have a PVC line running all the way down the back, where they can completely take off the costume if they so wish, and probably add another one on top. So I think that this is a great design feature, and the only flaw with it is that the hair does rather unusually float in mid-air. And I think that in certain angles this looks absolutely fine, however as you can see from the side it does look a little bit weird. And of course the biggest positive is that we get to put Jo Grant next to Third Doctor on our display shelves, once again completing another classic series TARDIS team. And why stop there with the exciting figures of the set? Because the third and final figure of the Three Doctors collector set is the one and only Brigadier, as portrayed by the late Nicholas Courtney. Now this will be of course the first of few Brigadiers that we would see as a part of the series, using a number of different parts. However, this time round we once again have the Brigadier as seen throughout the Three Doctors, in his much more higher ranking uniform in full design, including the hat. Of course the later releases would feature the jumper as well as the beret design. However, I think that this is partially the more iconic version of the Brigadier's costume. So taking a closer look at this, we do have some really lovely paint application on the main base sculpt of this figure, including the many different coloured ranks around the side and the paint application of each individual button having a golden highlight over the top. I also love the sharp detailing on the belt sections, even including a few stub holes in there, as well as on this section that goes up the very middle. We also have the inclusion of the gun holster on the side of the arm, as well as the unit logo even on the side of the upper half of his arm as well, which is a really cool touch. Of course, the lower half of the figure does also include some pockets, and the bottom half is basically your standard trouser sculpt design that has been painted in a regular green colour, and at the bottom we just get some regular shoes with your lace-up detailing. Of course, the figure does have some hands, as with all humans, but this time round you do have a sculpt of some gloves over the top of these, which have been painted a rather nice lighter brown once again. I do have some of your usual sculpting design that you would expect on some leather gloves, and then of course the opposite hand has been sculpted to be able to hold your regular knit pistol, which is just your regular Carter Options gun sculpt. Likeness to Nicholas Courtney, I think you can certainly tell who it is meant to be. Of course, we have the inclusion of the detailing of the moustache in the very middle, as well as a rather nice sharp detailing on the eyes and the eyebrows, and of course the main detailing difference on this head as opposed to the other Brigadier sculpts we would see in the later half of this series, inclusion of his uniformed hat there, with also some rather nice and impressive detailing on this, including the red band running around the side and the smaller brown band as well, even including the silver paint application at the side, as well as I do believe probably a royal emblem there in the very middle. So certainly tell who it is meant to be, and it is brilliant to finally have this figure in our collections after so long, and of course more importantly be able to display him alongside John Pertwee. And of course, putting all of these classic series figures alongside the third Doctor from the Three Doctors that did of course get released alongside a TARDIS in the B&M exclusive line back in 2018, we now of course have a wonderful unit family and a wonderful series of characters from Doctor Who's 10th anniversary episode. The Three Doctors collector set will be the last Forbidden Planet exclusive collector set for pretty much the majority of 2013, as we would return to the exclusive series later on this year. However, for pretty much the rest of 2013, we move over to Toys R Us to take a look at their 50th anniversary Dr. Dalek exclusive 2-packs. Now, for the most part, this series did see the re-release of a number of Daleks that looked rather similar to Daleks that we've already seen as a part of the Forbidden Planet exclusive line. However, in the cases of the first, third and eighth Doctor, we got to see some rather exciting variants. Now of course, as a part of this series I will only be covering the first to 8 Doctors, and I will not be covering the 9th, 10th and 11th Doctors because they are after all new series Doctors. Now from what I can recall, this series is in fact rather thought after, because normally they were released in groups, I do believe sets of 3 or 4 throughout the year of 2013, and once they were gone they did seem to be gone for good, and the only sets that did seem to stick around were the 2nd and 6th Doctors, which were admittedly rather similar to the original Forbidden Planet releases. Now of course, as a part of this episode I'm going to be taking a look at the first collector sets released as a part of the series, and then in episode 12 I will be taking a look at the admittedly more exciting later collector sets released. The first of the 50th anniversary Toys R Us Dr. Dalek 2-packs is from the 1960s serial Evil of the Daleks, and it's not particularly an exciting one to start off the series, seeing a re-release of the second Doctor action figure from the Three Doctors, with exactly the same paint application to the figure variant seen within the previously released 11 Doctors collector set. As for the second figure of the set, we have the Emperor Guard Dalek. This is very similar to the one originally seen within Dalek Collector Set 2. The main body of the Dalek is exactly the same to any other 1960s Dalek, with their usual silver and blue colour scheme. The most notable difference is the dome bulbs are now the same yellow plastic larger bulb released as a part of the Sound Effects Daleks range Wave 1 with the power of the Daleks Dalek. The Eye Stalker also has now received a black band, and the rest of the Daleks' black sections now have a matte black finish as opposed to a glossy black. Following on from the second Doctor and Dalek, we have the release of the sixth Doctor and Revelation Necros Dalek. Now, as a big sixth Doctor fan, I'm a little bit disappointed by this set, to be honest, and it is one that I didn't pick up back in the day, along with quite a lot of other Doctor Who action figure collectors, because this set is identical to the previously released sixth Doctor, as originally seen within Wave 1, as well as, of course, a release alongside the Revelation of the Daleks collector set, and likewise the Necros Dalek is also exactly the same to the original release, and of course very similar to the one seen within Sound Effects Daleks range Wave 1. Now personally, I think this is a little bit of a missed opportunity, as so far throughout the entire collection of 6th Doctor action figures, we've not really seen that many variants, and at the current time of filming, we still don't have a B&M exclusive variation of the 6th Doctor with another waistcoat, and although it may have not been accurate to Revelation of the Daleks, it would have been nice to take this opportunity to maybe see the 6th Doctor wearing his red and white waistcoat, for example, or just simply something different that isn't the original Wave 1 release. However, for those collectors that didn't get the original version, I suppose this made for a good opportunity to pick up the figures once again. In the later months of 2013, we've seen the release of some more exciting Dr. Dalek 2-packs exclusive to Toys R Us, this time round some more noticeable variants, starting off with Peter Davison as the 5th Doctor, alongside a Dalek from Resurrection of the Daleks. The 5th Doctor figure is a great variant, however one sadly that I do not have as a part of my own figure collection. So massive thank you to Macaulay Carnes once again for taking photos of this collector set so it could feature as a part of this series. The figure uses the standard 5th Doctor body that we've already taken a look at on multiple occasions throughout this series already, once again painted in the same costume variant colour scheme that we've seen with the 5th Doctor released alongside Davros as a part of the Resurrection of the Daleks collector set. The most noticeable difference of the costume is this time round the reds have been made ever so slightly darker to the extent of being burgundy, and the green used underneath the shirt collar has now been made a few shades lighter. The most noticeable difference is that now the 5th Doctor is packaged with the hatted head sculpt seen originally as a part of the Comic-Con Planet of Fire collector set. And to this day, as a part of the collection, the hatted 5th Doctor sculpt has only seen 2 releases, and therefore, if you are trying to track down this figure, it will no doubt be ever so slightly harder to find compared to the regular 5th Doctor head. The Dalek of the set is rather similar to the original Dalek released as a part of the Resurrection set, using a very similar base colour that might be ever so slightly lighter in shade, although it's not very noticeable. The biggest selling point of this Dalek is the vibrant orange bulb colour scheme that hasn't been seen on any other Dalek as a part of this series, and definitely stands out on the shelf. Although it does retain exactly the same rigid sculpt seen on a number of 80s Daleks around this time period. The midsection of the Dalek now also features a silver wash to give the appearance of metal on the slats mesh. The black band around the middle section is now a glossy black as opposed to the original matte black, and the plunger is also slightly more glossy, with a silver band that has been painted just below the sucker itself, unlike the original release. Overall, this set is one that I really regret missing out on as a collector back in the day, as it does feature a really lovely variant of the 5th Doctor, accompanied with a rather unique variation of Resurrection Dalek. I just wish I could go back in time and add it to the collection. However, sadly, these things happen, but who knows, one day I might be able to add it to the shelf. And if you do have it as a part of your collection, I'm rather jealous indeed. On a similar level to the Fifth Doctor and Dalek from Resurrection of the Daleks, Sylvester McCoy alongside a second Renegade variant is a welcome addition to the collection, and another I sadly didn't get as I underestimated the subtle differences, which admittedly are worthy improvements compared to that of the original. And to be honest, back in the day when this set was originally released, I had no idea that these changes even took place, and to be honest, if I could go back in time once again and purchase this collector's set, I definitely would, as it will be a worthy variant to add to the shelf. The Seventh Doctor, for the most part, isn't necessarily that exciting, and it is just like the original version that was also subsequently re-released singly. The only main difference seems to be a gloss finish that has been applied to the red scarf, and some slightly sharper, vibrant paint taps to the trousers, most notably the cream line section, as well as the black lines that have been used to create the check design. The Dalek is where things get a little bit more exciting, the best difference being something I had no idea about up until making this series. The unusual flat mesh seen on the original Remembrance of the Daleks Imperial and Renegade within the original Forbidden Planet exclusive collector set has now been retooled, still featuring the large section of slats, but the mesh style pattern has now been sculpted in between and a finish of silver wash has been applied over the top, a worthy change compared to the original version with a lot more detail. The main body of the Dalek is exactly the same colour to the original. The bulb lights have been replaced from the original smooth design to the modern 80s rib design seen on the vast majority of Daleks within the later half of the classic action figure series. The Eye Stalker also returns to the usual more common longer length as opposed to the stumpy variation seen on the original Renegade Dalek. And to finish, the midsection and weaponry have a glossy black finish, unlike the original version. Admittedly, at first glance, these differences aren't that noticeable, but from what I understand are more screen accurate compared to the original version, especially in the case of the Dalek. And of course, by this point, that original version of Renegade Dalek is considerably rare, and still is to this day. This variant set was also very welcome for those that hadn't picked up the original Cream 7th Doctor, that by this point was the first ever re-release of the Cream version to not be a Forbidden Planet exclusive, and the darker brown variation of 7th Doctor costume was definitely more common, being released as a part of general sale within the 11 Doctors collector set. An alright addition to the collection, but definitely one more so for collectors rather than occasional Doctor Who fans. So with that, that concludes all of the Toys R Us exclusive Dr. Dalek 2-packs that I will be taking a look in this episode. Join me in episode 12, where I will be taking a look at the remaining Dr. Dalek 2-pack releases, which admittedly see some rather exciting variants being released. The later half of 2013 sees a return to the Forbidden Planet exclusive series, with an incredibly exciting figure indeed. The San Diego Comic-Con release of 2013, it is of course Ace from Remembrance of the Daleks, as portrayed by Sophie Aldred. Now I can recall when this figure was originally announced because I was at an event at school, and I can remember coming out, opening up my phone and seeing the image of this figure and being incredibly excited by it, because Ace was one of my personal favourite companions, and she was one of the first ever companions, in fact, that I watched from the classic series, and it felt from the promotional images that Character Options had put every single effort into this figure. The sheer amount of accessories that this figure came with, the amount of posability that this figure had, it felt like this figure set contained absolutely everything, and naturally it was also incredibly exciting to see another classic series companion to add to the collection. Zooming in to take a closer look at the costume for this figure, and I think that Ace's bomber jacket is in fact one of the most impressive pieces of detailing that Character Options have ever done within the classic series Doctor Who line, or any Doctor Who figure line for that matter, because the amount of references and precision within the detailing of the badges on this bomber jacket is absolutely superb. At the very top we have the inclusion of the 2 Blue Peter badges, the lettering of the Ace roofing and Nico badge, as well as the Rupert badge towards the side, or at least a slight colour suggestion of that. And we also get a few further science fiction badges around the side. Also on the back of the bomber jacket itself, we get the inclusion of the iconic Ace lettering that has been really nicely and crisply painted. Opposite side of the arms, we get the further inclusion of more badges, including a smiley face and a few other rocket designs in there as well. And moving further down the costume now, we have the sculpting detailing of the skirt piece and of course the black tights with the black shoes there at the very bottom. I think that the one piece of detailing that really lets this figure down is the paint application on the head. The sculpt itself is absolutely brilliant and certainly looks like Sophie Aldred. However, the paint over the top of this is just incredibly off. I don't quite know what they were thinking at this point, but the paint looks incredibly thick and kind of lacks in any detail that all of the other Carter Options Classic Series action figures have. As you can see around the eyes, we have of course the inclusion of the eye white and the iris in there. However, these have been represented by just some simple blobs of paint, and the same can be said for the lips as well. Pink application over this just seems to be smothered on, and there doesn't really seem to be too much precision or care actually taken with this. However, at the top of the figure we do have the detailing of the hair, of course, which has been rather tightly sculpted back. We do have a few creases and lines within the hair itself, and then we do also have the inclusion of this PVC section running over the back, which is of course the braided hair coming down to the little yellow bobble at the very back, which would of course later change on the future releases. It would be nice to maybe see another release of this figure, maybe a part of the B&M exclusive series, of course without the accessories maybe, or something like that. Just seeing this sculpt, however, with some actual decent paint application added over the top, because it does look okay. However, it just lacks in sharp detailing that, as I said, the majority of other Classic Series action figures have. Following a very similar design to the Joe Grant figure that was of course released in the early half of 2013, this Ace figure does have a very similar feature where you can of course rip off the arms and take off the bomber jacket. Now this is a little bit harder than the Katie Manning figure, as you may be able to see. It does in fact take quite a while to take off the limbs, simply because these have been on for so long. If you twist them towards the side, they do eventually come off, and then you can slide off the bomber jacket to reveal the costume underneath. Much like the Joe Grant figure, this adds a whole different level of posability and variety to this action figure, as it does look pretty much completely different. However, the actual costume itself is kind of more a subtle change that can also be seen if the bomber jacket is on. Of course, this time round, we just have exposure of the white shirt underneath. Over the top of this, we have the detailing of the musical theme, so we have the trumpet in there, the saxophone, the guitar, as well as a few music notes coming around the side, and there isn't really anything on the back, just the inclusion of a few creases. Now if you were to pick up two versions of this figure, of course you could have both of them on display. I tend to have the Remembrance one with the bomber jacket and the Silver Nemesis one without the bomber jacket, to kind of get the most of the two different costumes that the figures can have. But I absolutely love this design, and I imagine that in the future, possibly as a part of the B&M exclusive series, this may come in handy to possibly see a survival variation of Ace perhaps. Taking a look at the many accessories that Ace does of course come packaged with, alongside the swappable arms and the removable bomber jacket, we do also have the inclusion of 3 cans of Nitro 9, 2 of which of course are just your standard open cylinders that have been painted with a silver paint app, and one of which is a Nitro 9 that is yet to be opened, therefore it has the white lid on the very top, which is of course almost a compulsory accessory for the Ace figure to have, and of course you can display this in her hands if you so wish. It is also worth pointing out, and something of which that I forgot to include when initially recording this series, that the Ace figure does also come packaged alongside a trusty bat accessory. This has a silver base colour with a few additional details of black and white bands. This can be displayed within the figure's hand, but also rather brilliantly displayed within the actual rucksack itself, poking out of the top. A brilliant design choice, and something of which once again that really shows that some thought has actually gone into designing this figure, making for a rather special release. Due to this Ace figure being from Remembrance of the Daleks, she does of course come packaged with the RPG that she does of course use to blow up some Imperial Daleks in that rather brilliant scene in the story, including the silver paint taps on the holder section at the very bottom, and the majority of the body of the RPG has just been painted black, and at the very end we have the inclusion of the green section along the silver tip and the yellow line on this. Now this isn't a solid piece. One head of the RPG is in fact a removable piece, which is absolutely brilliant. I love the fact that they've done that. A very simple choice for them to do, but a cool inclusion nevertheless. To carry all of these brilliant accessories, Ace does of course come packaged with her rucksack, which can of course be displayed on the figure's shoulders. Got the material designed rather well. This has just been painted, including a grey base colour underneath, a rather light base grey, and then we have a few black highlights around this, including a toggle section in the very middle and a little hook there at the very bottom. And then we have these straps, which as I say can be stretched over the figure's shoulders if you stretch out the arms, and on the very back we have a little bit of complete information. However, the brilliant thing about this, which I absolutely love, is that the back is actually removable, so you can physically put the Nitro 9 cans inside the actual rucksack and use it for what it is meant to be for, to store the actual accessories, very much like how she would do within the story. And you can place this over the top, and there you are, Ace can carry along her Nitro 9. And of course the release of Ace does mean the completion of another classic series TARDIS team between the 7th Doctor and Ace, one of the most intriguing and interesting and different Doctor-companion relationships to ever happen within the show's history, and naturally a lot of classic series Doctor Who fans were incredibly happy to have both of these rather excellent figures within the collection. Although by this point the classic series line was reducing its load of action figures quite rapidly, I think that the products that they did actually produce were of a rather high quality, certainly seeing less variants and more brand new figures. And I think that Ace is certainly one of those brilliant examples of a figure with a lot of detail, with a great amount of accessories, and naturally brilliant to display alongside the 7th Doctor, along with the other Remembrance of the Daleks action figures. Following on after the release of the SDCC Ace figure, we have the Pyramids of Mars Priory set. Now this set I still look back on to this day and think, how on earth did we get this product? It is absolutely mental. It is by far the largest ever classic series Doctor Who set that has been released, and that is of course most notably down to the inclusion of a cardboard flat pack, a Siren War Rocket. Brilliant. And we also have within this set the one and only Marcus Scarman alongside the second ever version of Sutek, 2 Canopic Jars, another little small control accessory, and of course a Egyptian Psychophagus. Once again continuing the theme of, although we're not seeing too many Forbidden Planet exclusive collector sets by this point within the line, the sets that we are seeing are going above and beyond to have amazing amounts of detail and some brilliant, beyond amazing accessories. So taking quite a far step back to take a look at the Siren War Rocket, of course this is entirely made out of cardboard. It is a flat pack piece that you need to build up within the box, and it is a really nice product. It's something of which that will look absolutely excellent with the rest of the Pyramids of Mars figures, and it kind of puts me in the mindset of the 3.75 time zone things that were released, however not absolutely crap. This set does work incredibly well. It looks exactly like what it is meant to be. I love the way that we have the design of the different pyramid sections around the side. There's lighter grey design, and of course around the bottom we have the black base, which also very subtly seems to have an Egyptian text design running around it, and of course the same can be said for the opposite side as well. It's just exactly the same. And of course in the very middle we do get the ramp section, which is once again a piece of corrugated cardboard that if you are careful your figure's on. However, it would need to be a lighter figure than this because it is only a piece of corrugated cardboard at the end of the day. It's probably not too good for balancing your products. And then we have of course on the inside of the door we have the inside of the ship, which once again is a little bit dusty because this has been on display for a number of years now, so wish you could bend that all the way up. However, I don't tend to do that. I just normally have it closed kind of, or just mildly open, but you could fold it all the way back if you so wish to. However, it is generally a really lovely product and a really great display piece for all of your other Pyramids of Mars figures that you've collected in the line over the many years. So taking a look at the first action figure of the set, it is of course Marcus Scarman, a figure that I quite never expected we would get within the Classic Series line, however one that I'm certainly happy to have because he is a brilliant character, and considering that we have so many characters from the Pyramids of Mars, it only really makes sense to have him as a part of the set. Now much like some of the other character options action figures of the lesser known characters, the main base of this figure does actually use, I do believe, a primeval body from another character options line. Costume itself is rather basic, however rather accurate to what is seen throughout the story, so we have the inclusion of the white suit piece over the top along with the grey waistcoat and the red tie with the white shirt underneath, and then at the bottom of this we have the inclusion of some regular grey trousers and some brownish black shoes there at the bottom. Very unusually, if we just turn the figure around to the back, we have the inclusion of this unusual design piece which I do believe is meant to be stitching on the back of the jacket, however this has been printed on, which is a very unusual choice, however I suppose it works just as well, and it is on the back of the figure at the end of the day so you don't really see too much of it. Likeness to Marcus Scarman, this figure is absolutely incredible. I really love the way that we've got this very pasty looking skin tone. I love the way that we also have this rather unhealthy looking glow around the eyes, making him look almost sleep deprived and zombie-ish. And then we of course also have the highlight of the eyebrows, and of course the very pale lips, and very much dead or like a corpse in a way. I really do love the sharper details around the sculpting of the creases and wrinkles around the face, as well as of course the ears going around to the side, and I also love the sculpting of the hair as well. A really lovely wash has been applied over the top of this to have a grey highlight. Really recall when I was taking a look at the Ace figure, which was of course also released in 2013, I was saying about the lack in detail on this likeness compared to the other Classic Series figures, and this is exactly what I mean by the lack in detail. This is what I expect from a Classic Series figure, because the detailing on this is incredibly sharp and crisp and looks absolutely stunning, and quite frankly puts the Ace figure to shame. The accessory to come alongside Marcus Scarman is the coordinate selector for the Siren War Rocket, which is pretty much just a basic silver cylinder. However, it does have a little bit of detailing on. As you can see, we have these Egyptian hieroglyphics around the side in a very same manner to that of the control unit things that come within the Canopic Jars that we've seen previously within the series. And whilst we are talking about accessories, of course for those of you that have been watching this series pretty much since the very early episodes, of course all of the mummy figures have of course came with Canopic Jars, and this set is no different. Exactly the same sculpt to all of the original ones, or at least the jar itself is exactly the same. We have the Egyptian hieroglyphics up the side. This time round we have a much more cleaner design, so there's not really any weathering applied to the top of this. However, we do have the inclusion of two brand new sculpted lid sections, including what I believe is a baboon. Of course this woman in there as well, which I do believe is most likely one of the Egyptian gods, which I can't quite remember the name of. And then of course once you remove this, you do have the inside that would normally feature the little control panel device. However, those haven't came with this box set, which I don't particularly mind because we've seen a number of those already. The second action figure of the set is also the second variation of Sutek. Of course previously in this series I have already covered the Jackal Head variation of Sutek that did come a part of the Pyramids of Mars set. This time round we have the much more iconic, arguably, variation of Sutek, this time round with the helmet. Not really going to bother taking a look at the costume in detail because it is exactly the same to the original, so mostly black, and we do have a few red highlights on this, especially towards the top half of the figure, including the red hands and of course the very large shoulder section, all of which is the same to the original figure. However, at the very top we do have the helmet design. The helmet is a really nicely sculpted piece featuring a lot of sharp detail. I especially love the Egyptian technique around the sides of the eyes of that vibrant red colour. Of course the very middle of the mask does also feature this almost serpent style head running up the very middle. You also have these fanned out sections at the very side along the circular section at the very top. Rotating around to the back we do also have this further patterned design along with this very small button that when clicked does in fact light up the eyes. However, as you can see on my figure, isn't in fact working, and that is because it's run out of batteries, and it is one of those very unusual small cell batteries that sadly I do not have. However, I will try to find an image of these lights successfully lit. Well, here we are, almost a year later, after originally recording that footage. I intended to go back and refilm that segment. However, I'm now editing this series currently within the COVID-19 pandemic, and I can't even go to the shop to buy basic essentials such as toilet roll, let alone small cell batteries. So here we are, you just need to have an image instead of one that I found online. I can recall the lights in fact being rather bright and vibrant, and of course those are accessed by a small button at the very back of the helmet, where the battery is also housed under a small piece of plastic. A great feature, and definitely sets this figure apart compared to some of the others on the shelf. Final inclusion of the Priory set is the Egyptian Psychophagus. Now this is a very similar situation to the Master's TARDIS, like the column variation and the grandfather clock. Can you really class it as an action figure? And I kind of do, and that is simply down to the fact that the design on this is absolutely incredible. The paint application over the top is also incredibly sharp, and it generally makes it very interesting to look at, more so than the regular grandfather clock Master TARDIS, or even the column design Master TARDIS. The Egyptian style headdress, which has been coated in a blue striped paint, along with the paint application of the golden section at the very top, as well as the makeup around the facial features. Moving down to the very middle, we have this rather gorgeous design of this lovely red and green colour, along with a few blue bands in there as well, highlighted by this golden outline around the sides. Of course, the character is also holding Egyptian utensils, where we have this flail section coming down the side, and also the hook or cane, whatever you would like to call it. I can't quite recall what these are called within Egyptian mythology. However, it's nice that those have been sculpted on. Around the wrists of the arms of the figure, we do also have the additional inclusion of a few further paint apps, and turning around to the side, we do also have a few further golden lines that are actually engraved into the sarcophagus itself, which is a brilliant touch and better than just being painted on. Of course, moving down the rest of the sarcophagus, we have this golden band which does follow all the way down to the base of the actual design itself, and also running up the side of the sarcophagus, we have this golden and blue design, which does also run around the divide, which is sculpted on as opposed to simply just painted on. Now, not only is this accessory or figure really nicely detailed, it does also open. So on the inside, we have the inclusion rather brilliantly of the time tunnel that does in fact connect Sutekh, of course, from his prison on Mars using a holographic plastic, which, as you can see when you turn it at different angles, we in fact have the recreation of the spinning time vortex as seen throughout the actual serial, which is absolutely brilliant. I love it. And once again, on the back of the sarcophagus base piece, the inclusion of a few paint apps around the back of the helmet section, however just a regular darker design on the sides. And of course, due to this set being released in 2013, what not of a better way to celebrate the 50th anniversary with a set completely dedicated to one of the most popular episodes within Doctor Who history. And what I love about this set in particular is not only does it feature some very unique and interesting figures, but also that the Pyramids of Mars has kind of been an episode that has always been followed through the classic series line, with the different variations of a Siren War Robot mummy figure, then the Pyramids of Mars 4th Doctor, then of course the Mars set. It has been an episode that has always been returned to, and it kind of makes sense that one of the last ever sets to be released as a part of the Forbidden Planet exclusive series is in fact from the Pyramids of Mars, and kind of the ending chapter to go alongside all of the other figures that we've seen from this story over the years. However, much like the Mars set, it would have been nice to see a Sarah Jane figure from the Pyramids of Mars included, because I kind of feel that she is the only character from the story that is missing. Somewhere around this time was the release of a rather exciting piece of merchandise for fans of the 4th Doctor, the 4th Doctor Time Capsule, featuring art cards of Tom Baker's companions, an early release of Terror of the Zygons on DVD, along with a book and a letter from Tom himself. The focus for many was on an exclusive action figure of the 4th Doctor regenerated, featuring a brand new head sculpt that remained exclusive to this set for a number of years. However, to be honest, I thought this product was overpriced and generally a little bit pointless, so I didn't end up buying it. However, with thanks to Macaulay Carnes, the action figure featured within this set can still feature as a part of this series through the use of images and technology. The most notable differences with this regenerated 4th Doctor is that quite obviously Tom Baker's head is placed on the 3rd Doctor's sculpted body. This has been painted to look like the costume as seen throughout the final 3rd Doctor story, Planet of the Spiders. The costume blazer has been made out of a rather glossy black plastic, which is something that is toned down on the later releases to be more of a matte plastic. The lining on the lapels is painted a shiny black, which is something that is also present on the USA version of the 4th Doctor regenerated action figure, however was later changed to a lighter grey on the latest B&M 2019 re-release. The frilled shirt has the appearance of a lighter blue as opposed to the mint green seen on the 2019 version, and of course the sculpt has now been altered, having the absence of the cravat or the bow tie. The trousers also seem ever so slightly darker compared to the later versions, and the same applies to the shoes. The main draw for this figure is the brand new head sculpt depicting Tom Baker with a more extravagant brushback hairstyle and wild looking eyes, depicting the heightened nature of his character from the season 12 opening story Robot. I really like this head sculpt, however I'm aware that some don't. One of the biggest paint application changes on the later versions of this figure is the inclusion of the bright ginger sideburns, something of which that is not present on this release. To be honest, I like the B&M 2019 version of the figure more, even though it looks a little bit more cartoony. The original seems to be painted in a rather dull manner, with little application on the eyes and an ever so slight wash applied to the hair that isn't particularly noticeable, but also the actual skin tone itself seems to be oddly very orange indeed, and for that reason, to be honest, I have no intention of actually tracking this figure down any once. I actually think that the re-release is much better. So thank you very much for watching this episode of Doctor Who The Classic Series Action Figures A History. I hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned for the next instalment of this series as we continue our look at the action figures of the 50th anniversary year of Doctor Who, taking a look at more Toys R Us exclusive Dr. Dalek 2-packs, including arguably the more exciting figures of the series, with of course a clear Dalek from the 3rd Doctor story Planet of the Daleks, and the comic book Dalek Alpha package alongside the 8th Doctor. But until then, I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.